All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Women in Product Conference 2022. I'm really thrilled to be here. And today I'm going to talk about Double Diamond, a framework to steer your team through ambiguity. A little bit about me first. My name is Srujani Kamieneni. I'm a product manager at Adobe. And on the top left over there is a picture from when I was 18 years old back home in India, next to one of my favorite movies of all time, Kung Fu Panda. I really wanted to work on a Kung Fu Panda movie when I saw the first one, and I got to do that as my first job outside college when I joined DreamWorks India as my first job as a technical director. When I was doing this job, I really got interested in the user experience part of what we were solving. So that brought me to the States to do my master's in entertainment technology. Here, I got exposed to a lot of the design thinking side of things, apart from the technical ways that you can implement user problems and solutions. And that brought me into Adobe while I was exploring my time at my master's at Carnegie Mellon with the Masters in Entertainment Technology program, I got to stay within the realm of creative technology and just art and technology. But at the same time, I was able to focus on delivering the best user experience possible because I took a lot of design electives. And today I've been at Adobe for about 3 years now, and I had the privilege of working on three different products in my time here on Adobe Dimension, Substance 3D Stager, and now Creative Cloud Express. Adobe Dimension and Substance 3D Stager are our 3D layout and rendering applications, while CC Express is our design application on the web and mobile. Now you know a little bit about me, but I would love to know a little bit about you. In the chat board, if you could tell me what your favorite Pokemon is, I would love to know. For those of you who may not know what a Pokemon is, just go ahead and Google the word Pokemon and tell us whichever you find the most appealing. So I'll say that this is integral to the presentation a little bit because my favorite Pokemon is Bulbasaur. Bulbasaur is the one on the far left here. It transforms into Ivysaur, which then transforms into Venusaur. For the sake of this presentation, these three Pokemons represent the different product management career stages. So Bulbasaur is the early career, Ivysaur in the middle over there is the mid career, and Venusaur is your senior and director and so forth. But no matter what stage of the career you're in, ambiguity is inevitable. Whether you're trying to solve for the right user problem amongst many user problems that you could get from feature requests, or whether you're trying to find the right product market fit, or even if you're guiding your design and development team to choose the best possible method to provide the solution, you're always in this stage where you have a vague idea of what needs to be done, but the details of how are a bit hazy. And a product lifecycle goes through several ambiguous stages like this. And of course, product managers are at the eye of the ambiguity hurricane. You may be working with engineers, designers, product marketing managers, program managers, leadership, and the most important of them all, the customers, who all have questions for you while you're figuring out these hazy details. And in all fairness, we do owe them answers. Oftentimes, even if you know the feature you're building or the user problem that you do intend to solve, you're asked questions which you're unable to answer at that moment. Whether it's your designer asking for details on the user journey, or your marketing manager for details on the time to market, or your engineer asking for long term specs, you don't always have all the answers, and that's not actually a bad thing. And today I'm here to tell you why that could even be a good thing. And why do I want to talk about this? I want to tell you a little bit more about me. Back in 2018, when I was a green new product management intern like Bulbasaur over here, one of the earliest career feedback that I received was that I needed to be comfortable in ambiguous circumstances. It's a very crucial part of a product management job because you're often finding yourself in the eye of that hurricane. And I needed to be a lot more comfortable with it. Let's cut to 2021. A few months ago, I have a new manager, and she says to me that one of my greatest strengths are that I'm not afraid of ambiguity. She said, "You seem very comfortable in it." And I swear it was completely unprompted. And in fact, when I showed her my last piece of feedback, she said she would not have believed it. So, what changed in those 2 to 3 years? I encourage you to guess in the chat pod. And if you do guess it, if you have been guessing, you're probably guessing it right. It's the double diamond framework. I was able to learn to bring a sense of organization to the parts of the process that were perceived to be hazy. And in fact, I started to learn that there may be no hazy parts at all. So, without going too much into the history of the double diamond framework, I want to show you what the anatomy of the double diamond framework looks like. This comes from the design world, and it was made popular by the British Design Council. And I personally discovered it during my time as a master's student uh, in one of the design electives that I took. We were asked to design a car interior for a future where self driving cars are the complete norm. And the former programmer in me jumped right into the possible solutions, because this is how I used to think. I used to think input, process, output. That's what I'm here for. I'm here for the process part. There's a definite input and a definite output. But luckily, I had a designer teammate who pulled us back a little bit. And I said, and he said, first, let's try to understand what it means to drive a car. And that just blew my mind. I was like, we know the full problem. We know that driving a car is driving a car, and we need to build for a time when there's no cars, no drivers for cars. But it started to hit me that there is more to even understanding the problem before I can even attempt to get to the solution. So, bringing it back to this framework, it consists of two diamond shapes that represent four phases: the discover phase, the define phase, develop, and deliver. It asserts the notion that the path from a problem follows these four phases before it gets to the solution. The first diamond on the left that you see in orange is taking as input a problem, and through the discover and the definition phases brings us to a solid problem statement. And that's crucial, the difference between a problem and a problem definition or a problem statement. The second diamond is for us to take the problem definition and develop further possible solutions that deliver one, and then deliver one that has the best feedback from customers. There's several different ways you can solve a given problem, and it's important for us to explore the different user experiences that may come from it. Now, the most important part about this diagram is to remember the diverging and converging shapes. The diverging shape, which is the first half of both the diamonds, it depicts the phases where we need to be in the exploratory and learning phase, where we're gathering the many potential paths we could take and not necessarily focusing on gaining clarity. The converging phases is where you do that. As we start to see patterns in our discovery or positive feedback on a certain potential solution, we start to drive focus on that one path. And if you were to map the ambiguity across time when you're going through this development process, you could see that ambiguity is, of course, highest in the discovery phase. And that is also the phase that we often feel most uncomfortable in. You don't know yet what you're doing, but you do know that you need to start discovering. So the levels start to drop as you go forward. It's much lower once you come to the center and you have a clear problem definition. Now you know exactly what you're solving for. But then it goes back up, not as high as before, when you start, when you come to the development phase. And this is where you're either designing various possible user experiences that might get you to the same outcome, or doing engineering explorations on how best to solve the problem. It's not clear which path we might take, but this is a divergent phase, and we need to only focus on finding out as many possible paths as possible. And in the final convergent phase, we start to get a lot more clarity on what the final product would be. And around that time, we have the solution. It should be pretty clear with very little left to the imagination. So your ambiguity levels are pretty low. And my designer friend and I have an inside joke over here where she said she's a designer and she speaks to a lot of clients. So she jokes that instead of on the on the y axis, instead of ambiguity, you could also put client anxiety levels. It's pretty high when we feel that we are in an ambiguous state. But really, there's no need to be as anxious because ambiguity doesn't mean that we're lost. Now, I want to ground this in a more solid example. I'll take you through a case study of 3D text in Adobe Dimension. It's been a well loved and well adopted feature. And I want to show you how the double diamond approach helped us define a core user problem and deliver a high value MVP. And I do want to point out the two words that I've bolded here, define and deliver, are the converging phases of the two diamonds. And often are parts of our product management vocabulary when we say we defined this and we delivered this. And that's always great to talk about in hindsight and after the fact. But the other phases, discover and develop, are also really important. So let's dig in. One of the highest requested features from our customers was to be able to extrude 2D vectors as 3D shapes. So what they asked was, I just want to extrude 2D vectors as 3D shapes. For those of you who might be new to these terms, don't worry too much. I'll just explain a little bit about what this actually means. Our customers from the Photoshop and Illustrator world, they're very used to making 2D shapes, like a vector diagram, like the rabbit that you see on the left. This was a comfortable starting point for them. They were definitely new to 3D and wanted to have a starting point that they had more control over. And they wanted to turn their 2D diagrams or 2D shapes into 3D, like the 3D rabbit on the right. So just taking the shape as an input and extruding the back of it to make a 3D shape out of it. This makes a lot of sense. I think people really wanted it for good reason, and we were the first 3D app and touch point that people would come into from a 2D world. So having that bridge was really important. But what we ended up shipping was a 3D text tool. What happened here? No points for guessing it. This time it is the Double Diamond framework. It definitely helped us bring a lot more organization to these ambiguous problems that our users give us. Let me go point by point, phase by phase on the Double Diamond framework. Now, to start off with the problem, we do know that there was no way to convert these 2D vectors into 3D. And as a 3D ingestion and rendering application, and also as the highest requested feature, we knew that this was a problem worth solving. This is something we should definitely consider. But instead of jumping directly to making a 2D to 3D converter app or converter feature, we intended to learn the needs much more deeply. We sent out a survey to all the customers that upvoted that feature. And with no particular solution in sight, we just wanted to know more to deeply understand their problem. We asked them, why do you want to convert 2D vectors to 3D? What type of 2D assets do you even start from? And what do you do once you have it? And really importantly, how do you currently do it? You don't have this feature in our app, so where are you going to do this? And how do you do that? This was our discovery phase, and the survey was really important, and we had a lot of engagement on it. And like I said, the point was not to figure out the solution, but to just deeply understand why they posed the problem that they posed. We then started to see some patterns. People said they needed it for logo creation. They said they had 2D text that they wanted to look more stylized, and drop shadow wasn't enough. They wanted to do make it more 3D looking so that it looks really cool when they put it on posters and flyers. And then when we actually did some close up interviews, we saw that when they were using their existing tools, we realized their logos were also made up of a lot of letters because they have the name of the company in it. And this was important. We started grouping things that seem together, what we call affinity mapping. The user problem started to make sense. And a big group was, I just want 2D text to convert to 3D. Another big group was, I just want some simple logos to turn into 3D. But even within those logos, we saw that there was a lot of text coming in. Excuse me. So we had a real clear idea towards the edge of this definition phase. We started synthesizing that there is no way to create 3D text from 2D. Instead of there being no way to convert 2D to 3D, we kind of narrowed it down to 2D text to 3D. And in solving this problem, we would solve the bulk of the user problems, the bulk of the reason that this was even the highest voted feature. So, with that, we were able to come to a problem statement for our designers and developers. We needed to create a 3D text tool. Now, while that is a great conclusion to the first diamond, and we knew that we were solving the right problem, but now we needed to solve the problem the right way, which is the second diamond. So we started with building a prototype. And I know that it sounds like it's an expensive method to take up. And I do agree that it is something that's worth evaluating before you choose to prototype, at least a high fidelity prototype. The reason we chose to prototype was because of the highly interactive nature of 3D. It would have been difficult for us to gain meaningful insights from lower fidelity prototypes because it would be flat and we wouldn't be able to tease out the actual depth of a 3D workflow. People need to be able to see behind their 3D objects. People need to be able to move around in the space, and they wouldn't quite be able to do that with something like a paper prototype. But I would definitely suggest that depending on the situation, a paper prototype, a UI mockup, and other low fidelity prototyping and testing is your friend. And it's really important that once you have a problem definition, that you don't start right away building it, but prototype the different user experiences that can possibly get you to the same endpoint. So here we wanted to learn what other 3D effects are needed. Is it just extrusion? I know they asked for just extrusion, but do they want to twist? They want to turn the individual letters, because the other tools that they were showing us, or the final examples, that the outputs that they wanted, really didn't look like it was just extrusion. It looked a little bit more beveled or like embellished, apart from just being extruded, like that rabbit was. Then we realized, well, we're building a text engine. Would fonts be important? This was not something we would have considered if we were building a 3D converter tool. But we built into this prototype just a limited amount of fonts because it was a prototype. And it was the first thing that got called out. Most people that tried it said, hey, I really want the fonts, the ability to bring my own fonts in. We also try to see if people wanted different colors for the front, the back, the sides. And this is an example of why a 2D test would not have covered this easily. When people started moving around, they said, oh, I would definitely give the sides a different color than the front. So here's an example of what those other 3D effects looked like, adding some kind of different bevel settings. The prototype basically used none of our code, and it was low cost to build. So we stuffed it with all kinds of effects. We stuffed it with way too many effects and gave it to our customers to test. But we gave them an actual real world problem to use it for. and we watched what they liked and disliked. And then again, we started to see patterns on the crowd favorites here. And you know the drill. You are in the diverging phase, but now we're starting to converge because we're starting to see a little bit of a pattern. We finally delivered what you see in market today, a text tool with extrusion control, bevel settings, and a robust font integration. This was really interesting to come to deliver at the end. But of course, the question on everyone's mind is, did it actually work? It did. We saw a 12% monthly active user adoption in the first month, and 90% of them would come back to edit. So we see that the people that really wanted it used it. It was about 12% of people that actually wanted to use this tool. And it is in line with the number of votes that we got on the feature request as well. But of the people that did use it, they found it extremely useful because 90% of them came back to edit it. And we were able to see that there was an eventual lift on the overall monthly active users of the application and the return rate. And we were able to attribute some of it to this feature. Of course, we delivered their most asked feature, so people definitely felt like they had a place to come back and a reason to come back to us. So we were able to, using the first diamond, solve for the core problem. And using the second diamond, we were able to cover the core workflows within that problem. And I think that's what is important. And if I had to go back to my Bulbasaur times and tell you what actually changed was my way of thinking. When I was a early stage product manager as a Bulbasaur, I fell into this trap, which I think is often the trap for other early career PMs and possibly people with programmer past life like me, that we assume that the problem at hand is the problem definition, and we immediately start to look for solutions in it. So I was always assuming that the problem I have is right at the center over here, and I would jump straight into the convergence part. What I do now as a self-declared Ivysaur, I start at the left end over here. I start at the problem and with no assumptions. And I learn to embrace the divergence. I learn to communicate to our stakeholders and others what we are doing in these phases. I learned phrases like the discovery phase, or we are still narrowing down the problem definition, or we're exploring potential user experiences before choosing the right one to build out for our customers. And as the advocate for the customer in your team, these are very powerful things to bring to the team and powerful phrases to tell your stakeholders. So, why does this work? This works because this framework has worked for me, especially because it helps communicate the different stages of your development process. It also forces you to allow time to refine the problem to a problem statement. And it also helps you deliver the most impactful solutions with high confidence. You already have tested this, you already know exactly what you're solving for. So you always have higher levels of confidence that this will work even before it hits the market. And it also, very crucial, allows time for engineering to explore multiple paths to a solution. We always assume that our engineers, which they are very talented people, but we assume that they always have the solution, but we have to acknowledge that they also need that divergence time to explore different paths that they could take. So I want to bring it back to our takeaways, what I hope to change in your mind today. I want you to be able to not just be comfortable in ambiguous circumstances, but thrive in it. I hope that I've been able to convince you that the divergent phases actually help us to be more confident in what we're building. And I want the double diamond diagram to be etched in your brain because it has been a cornerstone in my transition from early to mid stage career and something that I know is applicable throughout the product career, something that I know that is effective no matter what stage of your career you're in. And I want you to understand and hopefully agree with me that hazy stages are required in order for us to make sound decisions from a product perspective. Embrace that divergence. And for those of you who may or may not be in the early and mid stages, if you are one of the Venusaurs in the audience, which is the more advanced career stages, this happens in a higher level strategy as well. And I'm going to touch on a quick little story that I learned about during my master's when I was doing the same design elective, about how Nike chose to uh, pivot their strategy from selling to professional athletes to the everyday person, essentially the invention of athleisure wear. So there's this book, and I will send this out as part of the further reading, called Moment of Clarity, which one of the chapters is called Is Yoga a Sport? So when they were pivoting, or when they were thinking about pivoting, they had to discuss, what do we sell? We sell shoes. And they had to, as that first phase, understand what what are shoes? What are they even for? And they said, okay, shoes are to play sports. In the second phase, they said, okay, let's then define what sports are. Is yoga a sport? Because it's not competitive. There's no pro yoga people, but people do it all the time. Do people who do yoga need shoes, Nike shoes? And they realized that that's when they had to redefine their vision around not just selling for pro athletes, but also the everyday person that gets into sports. And my reason to show this is because there's many versions of the double diamond framework out there. It's a fractal. Even within each of these phases, you can again diverge and converge. And there's different ways that people in marketing and design and product have been able to use this. And I'm really excited to see how you use this. So thank you so much for joining me in this talk today. And I hope you've been able to learn something new here. It's been an absolute honor to be presenting here. And that is not an exaggeration. Women in Product has opened up the world of product management to me when I was a Bulbasaur and when I attended my first conference in 2018. I'd hoped that one day I'd come back and give a talk on the stage to give back to the community what I got from it. And I hope you found this useful. Thank you.